Good morning. We're going to start off with a fun song that reminds us that as we are transitioning in the middle of this, we hold on to what is true, and we'll get through it.
Don't you worry what they tell themselves when you're away. It just takes some time to go in the middle of the ride. Everything will be just fine. Everything will be alright, alright. Hey, you know they're all the same. You know you're doing better on your own, so don't buy it. Live right now, yeah, just be yourself. Doesn't matter if it's good enough for someone else. It just takes some time, little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything will be just fine. Everything will be alright, alright. It just takes some time, little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything will be just fine. Everything will be alright, alright. Don't write yourself off yet. It's only in your head you feel left out or looked down on. Just do your best. Do everything you can. And don't you worry about the bitter hearts are gonna say. It just takes some time, little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything will be just fine. Everything will be alright, alright. It just takes some time, little girl, you're in the middle of the ride. Everything will be just fine. Everything will be alright, alright. Days they force you back under those covers. Lazy mornings they multiply. The glory's waiting outside your window. So wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. Tongues are violent, personal and focused. Tough to be with your steady mind. Well, hearts are stronger after they're broken. So wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. And all these victims stand in line for crumbs that fall from the table. It's just enough to get by. And all the while your invitation, wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. Wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. Take from vandals all you want now, please. Don't trade it in for life. Replace your feeble with the fable. Wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. Wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. And all these victims stand in line for crumbs that fall from the table. It's just enough to get by. And all the while your invitation, wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. Wake on up from your slumber and open up your eyes. Lives were saved and not lost as you lay on that cross, and I saw the face of the one I love. You fixed the hearts that went wrong. You tipped the scale in the right direction, and I saw the face of salvation.
There's no need to run 1,000 miles just to get to you. There's no need to climb the highest mountain just to see you. And all the earth will shake as voices break the silence with 1,000 songs, 'cause we belong in your presence.
So count the days, count the cost. There is joy when we learn to love the cross. There we see the face of the one who loves. Touch his side, hold his hand. On Christ the solid rock we stand, and see the face of salvation.
There's no need to run 1,000 miles just to get to you. There's no need to climb the highest mountain just to see you. And all the earth will shake as voices break the silence with 1,000 songs, 'cause we belong in your presence. Salvation has a name. Salvation has a face. Salvation has a name. It's Jesus. Salvation has a name. Salvation has a face. Salvation has a name, it's Jesus. Salvation has a name. Salvation has a face. Salvation has a name, it's Jesus. There's no need to run 1,000 miles just to get to you. There's no need to climb the highest mountain just to see you. All the earth will shake as voices break the silence with 1,000 songs.
have been so, so good to me. For I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. Yes, you have been so, so kind to me. It's only overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. And oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Though I couldn't turn it, and I don't deserve this, but still you give yourself away. And only overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. I was your foe, still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind. God, and oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. No, I couldn't turn it, and I don't deserve it, but still you give yourself away. It's only overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, or lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, or mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, or lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, a mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, or lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, a mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, a lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Never-ending, reckless love of God. It's always chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. No, I couldn't turn it, I don't deserve this, but still you give yourself away. Overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. It's all this pain. I wonder if I'll ever find my way all this earth, could all that is lost ever be found? And could a garden come up from this ground at all? And you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. It's all around. Hope is springing up from this old ground, and out of chaos life is being found in you. And you make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make me new.
Make me you make me
You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust.
make me
You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us.
you make
You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of the dust. You make beautiful things. You make beautiful things out of us. You make me
Good morning, State Street. Welcome. We're so glad that you've decided to stream with us today. And it's always a joy to see your names pop up in our Facebook feed and see the conversations going on. It's just a great way to connect, and we're honored that you have chosen to spend this time with us this morning. This is my first weekend since we have come into this streaming platform that I'll be preaching on this platform. And I have to be honest with you, I'm a little nervous because I'm used to, obviously, you being in these seats. And so in my mind, I'm going to pretend that some of you are here and you're smiling at me, and I'm seeing these faces, the seats that you typically sit in that are now empty. But I remember those seats that you sit in, and I'm thinking of you, and I miss you. So welcome, and we're going to continue on and just be glad that we are able to have this time together. So last week we started a new series called The Middle. And it's this series about being in transitions, these seasons of transitions, walking through these in-between trials of life. And I know when Nate told me that this was the series that we were going to be doing, I thought, how much more appropriate can we be? Because we are very much in a transitional season right now, right? We're kind of in this season of waiting, not knowing what to expect, not knowing what is next. And so what a great series to be in during this time of our own middle. So during this season, we get a chance to look through stories of the scriptures, right? We get to look at stories, and I love that. I love that we get to spend some time in story because story is so valuable, right? The stories of scripture, they allow us to understand God in maybe a different way, maybe a way that we've missed. And we get to see these themes through stories, themes of restoration, themes of presence, and we get to see the heart of God in our continuing search for God. Now, last week we began this series by looking at the story of Job. And we looked at his season in the middle, which was a season of suffering. And we saw that Job was trying to discover God's heart. Through his season of suffering, he was trying to discover God's heart. And we learned in his season, if we could change the background on that, that would be great. Thank you. We learned that in times of struggle, we trust that God is better, more powerful, more loving, more merciful, and wiser than we can comprehend. That's what we walk away with. And I love that, right? It's true. I was going through the Twitter feeds this week, and Jonathan Merritt, in the same vein, said, God will always be better than our ideas of God. And I hope that we know it. Any idea that we have of God in our minds, of being a good God, of being a merciful God, he goes above and beyond, and we cannot even comprehend. So we continue in our discovery of God. We continue in our trying to figure out the heart of God, especially when we are in this space in the middle. And just as we talked about Job last week, this week we're going to spend some time talking about Daniel, looking at the stories of Daniel. And just as Job was in a season of suffering, we find that Daniel was in a season of exile. Many transitions throughout his season of exile. And so what is the story of Daniel? Now, just like last week, we tried to go through the entirety of Job in one sermon, which is a pretty big task. We're going to this week try to look at the entirety of Daniel's life in one sermon, which is, again, a big task. So we're going to kind of take a bird's eye view of Daniel's life, and we're going to see what we learned from that through his time in the middle. Now, we open up in this season of Daniel, in the story of Daniel, and we find him as a young boy. And his story is very much woven in with the story of Israel, because he was a part of the southern kingdom of Israel, otherwise known as Judah. And it was at this time that the southern kingdom fell to the empire of Babylon. The Babylonian Empire took over, and they were taken into captivity under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so as they were taken into captivity, the Israelites, the Hebrew people, were scattered throughout the land, taken into exile. And Daniel was a part of this. But the thing is, Daniel, he was a part of the royalty class of Israel. And so he was taken with an elite group of royals and nobles to be put into a class, to be trained, to be conscripted into the king's service. So Daniel starts from a different place, and we see this picking up in Daniel chapter 1, verses 4 through 7, which reads, "A young man without any physical defect, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Among these chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. So we see the beginning of his story as a young man brought into the king's palace to train to be part of the king's service. And as we follow their story, we see that Daniel, along with his 3 friends, make a decision right here at the beginning. We're told at the beginning that they were to eat the food of the king, the wine of the king, this rich food. But for Daniel and his friends, this went against the way that they lived life. They were totally being immersed into the culture of Babylon, right? But this eating of the food to them would defile them based on what they lived out and following their God. And so they made a simple choice. They said, we're going to vow not to eat the king's food, not to drink the king's wine. We're going to eat vegetables and we're going to drink water. And the thing is, they did do that. And they ended up being the strongest and the healthiest of all these young men brought into service of the king. In fact, we continue on in verse 17, and we're told, to these 4 men God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. And so we have this opening chapter of Daniel, seeing how his life in exile was beginning. And we get this kind of clue, this foreshadowing, that his life of exile was going to last a while, because we're told that he would remain there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. We follow Daniel's story into chapter 2, and in this chapter, we find that he faces the threat of death. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, he found himself having dreams that worried him, dreams that kept him up at night. And so we put out a call to all the astrologers and magicians and enchanters and said, I want you to interpret this dream. But not only do I want you to interpret this dream, first, you have to tell me what the dream is that I had, because he was afraid that if he told them, they would just make something up. And so he wanted to make sure that they really had a gift of interpretation. So we said, first you're going to tell me what my dream is. Then you're going to tell me what it means. And no one could do it. And they pled with him, Sir King, please just tell us what the dream is and we'll tell you what it means. But he says, no, he wouldn't tell them. And he became so angry that he said, I'm going to put them all to death. All the astrologers, all the magicians, all the enchanters, and all of the wise men. If they can't give me what I want, then they will be put to death. And this included Daniel. Daniel was a wise man. So the news came to Daniel that the king had issued this decree and his very life was on the line. And so Daniel went to his friends, these same friends that he had first come into exile with. And he said, let's pray. And they prayed for mercy. Please, God, grant us mercy. And they prayed for understanding, and they prayed for wisdom, and they prayed that God would reveal that dream and what it meant. And he did. God revealed the dream to Daniel. So Daniel, he went to Nebuchadnezzar and he says, King, oh king, I cannot tell you what your dream is, but my God can. And he proceeded to tell him what the dream was. And he began to interpret that dream for him, a dream about kingdoms and how they would fall and how they would rise, And Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed that he placed Daniel and his friends into higher positions. Now we continue on in Daniel's story, and kings we see come and go. Nebuchadnezzar is no longer king, and now his son, Belshazzar, is king. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, when he was king, he learned a lot from Daniel. And he respected Daniel's God. And he learned through many mistakes, he was still able to learn humility and to come back and understand Daniel's God. But Belshazzar, his son, had not learned these same lessons. And we pick up in this story where Belshazzar is having a feast in the castle, right? In his royal palace. He's having a feast. And he decides, I'm going to bring out the spoils of war in order to show all my guests. And he brings out the goblets that were taken from the temple in Jerusalem when they had captured Judah, when they had captured the city. And they begin to drink from these goblets. Now, these are meant to be holy goblets, special goblets, meant for God's service. And here, Belshazzar was just treating them as if they were the same old, same old. And so all of a sudden, they're drinking from these goblets, and they're lifting up praise to false gods, the false god of gold, the false god of silver, of wood, of bronze. And then all of a sudden, the fingers of a human hand appear, and they write a message on the wall. Now, if that isn't enough to freak them out, the fingers of a human hand, they don't understand the message because it's not written in a language that they understand, and so chaos ensues. Who can interpret this for us? We don't understand. And it just so happens that the queen remembers Daniel. She says, there was a man who was in the service of your father, and he's still in this kingdom. Maybe he can help. And so they called for Daniel to come, and Daniel came, and he did understand. And he was able to read the message on the wall, which was a warning to King Belshazzar. He basically said, you have not learned the lessons of humility that your father learned. You have not learned these lessons, and you have been found wanting. He said, this very night, your kingdom will fall. And that's exactly what happened. That night, the Medes came in, and they conquered the kingdom of Babylon, and King Belshazzar was killed by King Darius the Mede. And so we continue on. Now we're in a completely different kingdom, right? We've gone through the Babylonians, and now it's the Medes that are in charge, particularly King Darius is king. But Daniel still remains. In fact, Daniel just continues to rise in the ranks because he's smart, and he's capable, and he's trustworthy. And King Darius, we see through chapter 6 that he actually really likes Daniel. And so he gives him more and more responsibility. But as often happens when someone gains more responsibility and other people want power, Daniel found that he had some enemies. And these enemies didn't like to see Daniel succeeding, so they set about to carry out a plot of sabotage. They went to King Darius and said, King, oh, king, may you live forever. We think that you should have a decree that states that you may only bow to you, and no other God. And if you do bow to another God, well, then you will be put in the lion's den. And obviously, this is a story that's familiar to us, probably the most familiar Daniel story that most of us know. And King Darius, he falls for it. He manipulates it. There's egos involved here. And so Daniel gets news that now this is the new decree. You must only bow to King Darius. But Daniel just goes about his business. He goes home. He goes out to his room. He bows down and he prays to his God 3 times a day. And those that plot against him, they find him praying. And they come to King Darius and said, we found Daniel praying to his God and not you. And your decree states that he must be put into the lion's den. We get the sense that Darius doesn't want to do this. He likes Daniel. But his decree cannot be overturned. And so Daniel is lowered into the den of lions. And the words of King Darius as he's lowered is, Daniel, I hope that your God rescues you. He doesn't want to see him die. And Daniel is in the lion's den, and we know that God shuts the mouths of the lions. And Daniel survives a night in the den with the lions. And King Darius returns the next morning after a night of fitful sleep. And he says, Daniel, are you still alive? Did your God rescue you? And Daniel is alive. And so the king has him pulled out of the den of lions. And we read this in chapter 6. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So this is kind of a bird's eye view of Daniel's life. Obviously, there's so much more, and we could spend weeks diving into each of these individual stories and so much more. But for our purposes today, we look at this view of Daniel's life, and we make our way through the chapters of Daniel, and we notice a couple of things. We notice that the kings, they come and go, right? They come and go during this time, but Daniel is still there. Daniel still remains. He remains through the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, and we actually see that there's a bit of relationship there. Nebuchadnezzar likes Daniel. He listens to him. He's open to God because of Daniel's role in his kingdom. He remains through the reign of Nebuchadnezzar's son, Belshazzar. Although it seems that he takes a bit of a lesser role in this kingdom, he is still there. He remains when the Babylonian kingdom is taken over by the Medes, and King Darius gains power, all the way through the first year of King Cyrus. Side note, when King Cyrus becomes king, he allows Daniel's people to return to their homeland, to return to Jerusalem. But in all, it's 70 years of exile, 70 years of waiting, of transitions. And yet Daniel remains. Through exile, through decrees of death, through the egos of kings and regime change, Daniel is still standing. Sometimes he rises in the ranks. Sometimes he goes quietly about his business. But he knows who he is, right? Knowing who he is through different seasons of exile. Daniel knew who he was in and out of exile. He filled the space that he was designed to fill through various transitions. It wasn't all the same, right? Through seasons of prosperity, to seasons of uncertainty, and all the seasons in between. He knew who he was, and his circumstances didn't change that. Through each season of his exile, he filled the space he was designed to fill. And the thing is, Daniel was taken into exile at a very young age. I think there's something to be learned there. So often we dismiss the passions of the youth, right? We dismiss them. We think, well, they're not old enough. They haven't lived enough. They're not wise enough. But I don't know how many times I am so encouraged by our young people, the young people in our space, in this world, who are convicted, right? They show such deep convictions for justice, for neighborliness. So I think we can learn something here, that there's something to be said for the passions of the young, the convictions of the young. We see it in Daniel. They were good and they were true. Daniel went against the expected, what would have been expected of him going into exile, and he stayed true to himself. And how did he do it? At the beginning, he simply ate vegetables, right? He stayed true to his convictions by eating vegetables. Now, maybe this doesn't seem like a big deal, but this was the thing that was right in front of him, right? This was the thing that made sense to him, that allowed him to stay true to who he was, to follow his own convictions. And the result was he stood out. And because he stood out, we follow his story and we see that it's a bit of a threat to some people. There were those who didn't like it. Because he stayed true to his convictions, he was at times placed in dangerous situations. But he knew who he was, because he knew who his God was. And this remained the same when his circumstances changed. He filled the space he occupied in a way that stayed true to himself and who he knew himself to be, grounded in who he knew his God to be. We look at these familiar stories of Daniel, and oftentimes we walk away with just singular lessons, right? We walk away with the lessons that we're trained to walk away with, right? Be strong. Don't be afraid. And while these are good messages, absolutely these are messages that we find in the stories of Daniel, they're not the only messages. And that's the thing I love about story, because we can turn these scriptures and there's always something new to discover. There's always something new to learn. Because sometimes we could look at Daniel's story and feel inadequate. What if I am afraid? What if I'm not strong enough? And the thing is, I don't believe that these stories are given to us as a means to discourage us in how we fail. I don't believe that. It's not a story about being the best. Rather, we read these stories and sometimes we're encouraged to be strong. Sometimes we're encouraged to not be afraid. And sometimes, as we see through Daniel, we are also encouraged to be who we are. To be who we are, to fill the space we are designed to fill. Instead of being discouraged by what we are not, we are encouraged by what we are, by who we are designed to be. So who are we? Who are we? We ask ourselves that question, right? Who are we? Who were we before going into a time of transition, a time of exile, a time of middle? Who am I going to be during this time of middle of uncertainty? And the thing is, sometimes we forget who we are. Because sometimes it gets a little fuzzy, right? We forget. I think in normal times, we define ourselves by comparison. We tend to do that, right? That's totally normal. We tend to define ourselves by comparing ourselves to others. But the thing is, I think in times of middle, in times of exile, in times of transition, this comparison is heightened even more than normal. Because when we feel stuck in the middle of uncertainty and transition and waiting, we naturally kind of want to look around and see what everybody else is doing. What's everybody else doing? How's everybody else handling this? Because we want to know that we're doing it right. Because we're not sure. We're entering into unfamiliar territory, and we want to know that we're doing it right. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? We learn from each other. We always want to aspire to learn and grow. And we are naturally inspired by each other. We learn from each other. But the thing is, sometimes we fall victim to this idea that we should be doing things exactly how someone else is doing it. And if we're not, well, then we somehow must be failing. And then we turn our exile, we turn our middle into a competition. Think about it. How many pandemic competitions have we entered in, either by choice or not? Do we realize that no one is handing out awards for best performance in a pandemic? Do we realize that? Do we realize that, if you're not learning a new skill or juggling all of the things, well, that's okay. And on the other side of that, if you are learning new skills and you are juggling all the things, that's okay too. because we're not all wired the same way. For some of us, making crafts or posting great videos or writing beautiful notes is the way we are winning the pandemic, right? For others, wearing stretchy pants and making sure our kids don't fail e-learning and stay alive is the way we are winning the pandemic. And it's okay. It's okay. If you're watching trash TV, if you're drinking too much coffee, if you're making an extraordinarily amount of baked goods, that's okay. We are not failing just because we're not doing it like someone else. We forget that we are not all meant to be the same. Who we are was never meant to be all of the same. I'm currently reading a new book by Jen Hatmaker entitled Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire, and she talks about this idea of us not being the same. We're not supposed to be the same. She says there is no typecast in humanity. There is no typecast in humanity. I think we forget that we are created by a creative God, right? We were made by a creative God, and in that, there is no assigned value of rating for us, right? It's not, you're okay, you're a little better, you're best, right? We are not categorically ranked, except that we believe that we are. We get in that mindset where we believe that we are, and we fall victim to this trap of comparison ranking. And the thing is, I will say that I think women fall into this kind of disproportionately, right? Not that men don't struggle with this at all, but I will say that women are especially susceptible to this comparison ranking, right? We've gotten really good at living our lives through this lens. We change who we are fundamentally in order to try to change our rank. And we get really good at it, right? We've learned how to read a room and make ourselves fill that space, the need of that room in order to feel belonging, in order to feel loved. What does this experience need me to be? Who do these people need me to be? And we shape shift, right? Depending on our perceived notion of need and belonging. And in the process of doing this, we kind of become a bit like martyrs in it. We can be, right? Because we've learned how to do this and frame it in words like selflessness, right? We're going to frame it in holy words like selflessness to try to make it okay. But that's not what I'm talking about, right? I'm not talking about the idea of selflessness in order to serve others, right? I'm not talking about seeing a need and meeting it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fundamentally changing our core, fundamentally changing the way we are wired in order to belong. For so many of us, we feel like we must change in order to feel belonging. Even if it goes against who we are and the space we were designed to fill, we change our shape in order to fit a perceived notion of who we think we're supposed to be. And I hate that we've learned how to do that so easily. It comes so natural, this ability to shape shift, and I hate that. Where does it come from? My suspicion is that we learn it at a very young age. For me, I entered this world certain that everyone liked me. That was my notion, right? I mean, why wouldn't they like me, right? I was certain that everyone liked me, and I think it's because I liked most people. That's the way I'm wired. I was a happy kid. I have adults in my life who knew me when I was a kid, and they often tell me, you were just a really happy kid, right? I was a happy kid, and I carried that with me. I am naturally optimistic. It's who I am. Right? I am just naturally an optimistic person. That's the way I'm wired. And I've spent most of my life carrying that with me into a room, carrying that with me into a situation. And for a long time, I assumed that everyone was the same. Everyone was just like me. Until I realized that they weren't, right? They weren't. And I also realized that not everyone appreciates it, right? Not everyone appreciates my sunny side of life, half glass full way of viewing the world. In fact, it came to my attention that some people are actually annoyed by it. Annoyed by it. And I had these kind of aha moments. Maybe you've had them before. These aha moments of realizing that someone didn't like me, right? Oh, okay, they just don't like me. They don't like who I am. Oh, and we have these aha moments, right? They just don't like me. And these aha moments can sometimes lead us to a conclusion that we're unlovable, that we're not enough, or we're too much, right? Which is not only unfortunate, but it's also a lie. Because remember, we come from a creative God. We are not all meant to be the same. We are not categorically ranked from okay to best. We are made in the image of God, a creative God, designed to fill our own unique space in our own unique way. And when we embrace this, when we really begin to know it, we carry it with us, right? We carry it with us. We carry with us who we are. We carry with us who we are meant to be, grounded in who we know our God to be. We carry it with us, filling the space we were designed to fill, not making ourselves smaller than we are meant to be for the comfort of others, not changing who we are fundamentally in order to fit the environment we're in, but being who we are designed to be, filling the space we were meant to fill. And so we discover, right? And we go back to that question, who am I? And we get a chance to discover who we are. Who are we at our core? Who am I at my core? Who do I want to be? And the thing is, when we're in times of middle, times of kind of stuck in between, waiting for what's next, the middle has a way of showing us who we are, right? And it has a way of showing us who we want to be. Who am I? Who was I before this? Who am I in this time of middle? And who will I continue to be on the other side? We look at Daniel, right? Daniel probably didn't know when he first came into exile that he could stand up to a lion, right? He didn't come into exile with this in his mind. Well, I'm going to come in and stand down a lion. He started with vegetables, right? He started with vegetables because that's what made sense to him. He knew who he was, grounded in who he knew God to be, and so he made the next right choice. He took the next right step, staying true to who he knew he was. So we discover who we are. And it's a journey, right? And it changes, right? We discover who we are. Maybe we don't begin with lions. Maybe we begin with vegetables. What is my next right step? What am I learning about myself? Am I discovering something new about the way that I am wired? Something I'm learning about myself through this time of middle. Something that I've often suspected, but I'm learning to be true, is that I believe I'm letting you know a little secret here. I'm a bit of a closet introvert. Now, I can hear the laughter through the waves, right? I know some of you are at home thinking, no way. You're one of the loudest people I know. Have you heard you laugh? Yes, I know. I get that. I am very extroverted in some situations, but I'm learning that even though I am extroverted, I have a lot of introverted tendencies, and they're beginning to come to light in this time of middle, right? Yes, I love people, right? Much to my husband's chagrin, I will be the last one standing in a room if there is good conversation with people I love. I will stay to the bitter end. But it's also true that there are times when I can be in a room of people and feel utterly alone. If they're not my people, if I'm not sure how they feel about me, I can feel at times insecure, not knowing if I fit in the space that is being filled in that moment. And I've learned that during this time of middle that I'm okay with being home. Right? I'm okay with spending time alone. I actually enjoy it. Time to read, time to watch what I want, time to do what I want. And I like that, right? But I also find, even though I do have these introverted tendencies, I still need those connections, right? We all do. And so I'm finding ways to connect through this time of quarantine. Now, for me, things have been uprooted a little in my home because we've brought home 2 of my kids from college. We were doing pretty well with, my husband and I and my youngest son, and now we've brought home our girls from college, which I consider bonus. I was not going to get that time with them, and now I do. And it's mostly good, sometimes annoying, right? As it always is. But I get that connection. I've also found during this time that I can connect with my sister. My sister is a complete phone person. Like, she likes to talk to people on the phone. I, on the other hand, do not. Again, maybe part of an introverted tendency, I don't know. I don't call people. And much to her disappointment, I'm never the one that calls. And I think that she's figured that out, that that's just who I am. So she calls me. And we've gotten in this rhythm of talking about once a week, and we talk about serious stuff because she's a nurse. She's a nurse in Chicago facing really scary things and being overwhelmed by a lot of big, overwhelming things, and I'm so proud of her. But then we talk about silly things too, right? We catch up on all the trash TV that we're watching during this time because sometimes we just need that moment of levity, right? And we connect. I find small ways to connect through the church, right? To help this introverted extrovert through this time of quarantine. How do we connect? Through times of streaming, through social media, through picking up the phone to call someone, through text chains, we connect with each other. We discover things about ourselves through the middle, right? I'm discovering through this time of middle that I'm reminded. Sometimes we have to remember things about ourselves that maybe we have forgotten. I've been reminded that I'm a bit of a dreamer. I'm a bit of a dreamer, and sometimes I forget. Right? My daughter Grace, who I mentioned is home from college, was interviewing me for a school assignment this week. Not a lot of people to choose to interview when you're in a house of 5. And she asked me where I saw myself in 10 years. And it's something I think about, right? It's something I think about. What are my next steps? What is my next right thing? And I can't answer a question about 10 years because, to be honest, I would have never imagined 10 years ago that I would be where I am right now, right? But I love to dream. I love to think about what may be next. What's next? How can I dream? How can I learn? How can I grow? And I'm reminded that I'm a bit of a dreamer. And that's good. It's part of who I am. It's part of how I'm wired. We discover things about ourselves. So we walk through our exile. We walk through the transitions of our middle, and we discover. And we grow. Sometimes the middle isn't facing down a lion. Sometimes it's making simple choices that allow you to be who you are, grounded in the knowledge of who God is. Simple choices that move us toward contentment and connection during this time of waiting. Simple choices that move us toward the next right thing. Simple choices that allow us to be thankful even when we're unsure, and even when we're in exile. So be who you are. Know who you are. Discover who you are. Dream about who you will be. And fill that space. And this is going to look different depending on who you are. Remember, God is a creative God who has made us in his image. We were never meant to be the same. So maybe knowing who you are is discovering something new. Maybe it's standing down a proverbial lion, knowing that God is right there with you. Maybe it's needing a time of rest. Maybe it's dreaming a new dream. Maybe it's being inspired by the goodness you see around you, because it is around you. Know who you are. Know the way that God created you and carry it with you. Carry it with you. Please pray with me. God, we are so thankful for this space. Thankful that we can continue to come together and discover who you are. Seek after your heart. Remind us again and again that you are good. Remind us again and again that we are made for a purpose and we are made in your image and we are good. God, give us the certainty to dream. Give us the ambition to grow, to learn, to be challenged, and to know that you are right there with us. You are in our middle with us. May we carry you with us as we walk through it onto the other side. God, we thank you. Thank you that you have made us to be exactly who we're supposed to be. May we be excited by it. And may we continue to grow. It is in your name we do pray. Amen. Please pray the Lord's Prayer with me. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Be still and know that the Lord is in control. Be still, my soul. Stand and watch as giants fall. I won't be afraid. You are here. You silence all my fear. I won't be afraid. You don't let go. Be still, my heart, and know I won't be afraid. still and trust what the Lord has said is done. Find rest, don't strive. Watch as grace invade the line. I won't be afraid, you are here. You silence all my fear. I won't be afraid, you don't let go. Be still my heart and know I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid. Surely love and mercy, your peace and kindness will follow me, will follow me. Surely love and mercy, your peace and kindness will follow me, will follow me. Surely love and mercy, your peace and kindness will follow me, will follow me. Now surely love and mercy, your peace and kindness will follow me, will follow me. God, your love surrounds me, your love surrounds me. Your love surrounds me, your love surrounds me. Surely love and mercy, your peace and kindness will follow me, will follow me. Surely love and mercy, your peace and kindness will follow me, will follow me.
Couple things before we go today. Again, we want to thank you for streaming with us today. A reminder that you can find all of the stuff for the service on our app if you have not been there yet. You'll find the songs, you'll find sermon notes, you'll find a way to connect with us. If you have prayer requests or just want to reach out, we would love to hear from you. Also, if you want to give to the mission of State Street in the PAC Center, we are still up and running. We covet your gifts, and we're so thankful for a generous community that continues to give during this time. So you can give online at statestreet.tv, or you can go through the app and give that way as well. As we go out this week, I hope we carry the lessons of Daniel with us. And we know that that we are in a period of discovery, right, which is cool. And one thing that I didn't get a chance to talk to about Daniel, but did stand out to me, and I think it's of note to mention, is that as we follow his path, he was never alone in this journey. I mean, aside, we knew God was with him, but he also had these friends that he always went to. And so there's something really special about the community that Daniel was able to carry through his season of exile along with him. And so we have this community too. We hope that you know that. We hope that you'll reach out to us if you want to, just to talk, just to say hi. We love you. And we can't wait for the day when we get to see you face to face and hear your voices and hug your necks and just love you. So have a great week. Carry the knowledge of who you are with you throughout this week. Peace be with you.